so much for that intro. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me. I came from San Francisco. It's an honor to be here in Austin. And it's also an honor to have so many PMMs in one room, an opportunity that I think very few of us actually get. So I'm really excited to get to know all of you in the next few days. I know you already asked some of these questions, but I didn't get a clear view. So just to get to know you guys a little bit better, who here serves B2C customers? Okay, about 15%. And B2B? About most of the room. Any other developer marketers in the crowd? Okay, we have a couple. That's great. Awesome. So I'm Martin, and what I'm going to talk today about is launching, and leading marketing for a product at Google. As was mentioned in my intro, I actually had a couple startups before this one that ended up failing, but this one didn't. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited to talk to you specifically about Flutter today is that it targets one of the hardest audiences to reach as marketers, developers. An audience that's really hard to reach without zeros and ones. So I hope you guys can take some of these lessons that I'll talk about and apply them to your specific products and campaigns. Okay, so we've all heard this saying, build a great product and users will come, right? But let's be real, this is a complete myth and urban legend, right? It's not enough in 2020. Sure, it helps to have a great product, but you have to connect them to the right users. And if you don't, then they'll maybe come with luck or they won't come at all. So what about this one? Build a great product and hope users will come. A little bit better, cautiously optimistic, right? But it's definitely not why we're all here today. So what's left? Well, at Google, we define marketing as know the product, know the user, connect the two. And the reason why I really like this vision is that a lot of products are awesome, right? I thought Vine was great. That's gone. I use Google Inbox a lot in the last few years, and that's also not here anymore. And Blockbuster was the best, right? But it's really up to us, product marketers, to ensure we're not building great products, but also connecting them to the right users and building the right products. So the way I want to structure this presentation is I want to very briefly talk about Flutter, the product, just so you have some context. I definitely don't want to come up here and just pitch and sell Flutter, because the goal of this is really to talk about what we did so that you can apply it, but I need to lay out some context so you know what it is. And I'll talk briefly about who the users are. But I want to focus most of the presentation on the third part, the connection. Because I think that's where it's really interesting to start abstracting where can you apply these in different areas and campaigns. Okay, so let me start with some facts. We spend about 15% of our time every day on our phones. That's over 10 years of our lives. Think about that for a second. 10 years ago, many of us had BlackBerries in our hands, right? Not only that, but we actually check it 52 times a day. And I see a few of you checking it right now. Right? So imagine if you add the time we also spend on our tablets and our computers. So this all brings us back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, as many of you know, we have basic needs at the bottom as human beings, like food, water, and shelter, and self-actualization at the top. But there's actually been a shift in this hierarchy to affect our new reality, which looks like this. Right? I actually think we can add one more layer to this one. Right? So clearly, in today's world, being on our phones is really, really important. But even knowing that, in 2020, it's still incredibly hard to build apps for all these devices. Let me give you an example. The Slack app. So in the Product Marketing Alliance, we use Slack a lot. It's one of the really cool parts that allows us to connect with people all over the world. And when I'm using Slack, I use it, a lot of times on my iPhone, a lot of times on my, Windows. I'm sure many of you have used the web version or Android version. It looks pretty similar, but it's on all these different devices. Now, the Slack team, in order to give you that experience, they have to either build it completely different times on each platform using several code bases and teams, which, given the fact that it's a very similar end product, doesn't make a lot of sense, or they have to build using a traditional cross-platform tool, which means you build it in one place and deploy it to all these platforms, but the quality is not the same because it's not actually native. It wasn't built with that specific platform in mind, right? So that's the dilemma that we face, whether it's compromising on quality or on time and money. And so that's why Flutter exists. So that's what the product is. So Flutter is Google's UI toolkit to develop these experiences, these applications from one code base that actually run fully natively on each device, as if you were to build it separately for every device. So as you can imagine, that's why it saves a lot of companies time and money, but also you get that native result. Okay, great. That's all I'll do about the actual product. But now you have a little bit more context. Let me talk about the users. Who are the users? Well, developers. right? And many times when people think of developers, they think of someone who's locked in their basement with the windows down, hacking on government code, right? But that's not who developers are. You know, developers are people just like you and me who are trying to solve real world problems, create solutions, and really impact and help those around them. But they're an incredibly hard audience to reach. And that's because their switching cost is huge. So telling a developer to switch to a new tool, it's like you're telling your friend who's, let's say, has been playing on her Fender guitar for the last 10 years to use this new guitar for her upcoming concert. Even though the new guitar objectively might have better sound and be way better, still that experience of switching is incredibly difficult. So you know, when I think about marketing to developers specifically, all the things I learned about traditional marketing need to be completely recalibrated, right? This is an audience who's on Reddit, has no time for fluff. You identify a campaign and they turn their heads, right? So we have to really rethink about how do we reach this audience. But I think that also applies to other audiences beyond developer, but it's especially difficult many times for the developer audience. So, you know, when I joined the Flutter team and, you know, as the first marketer and I was assigned, okay, you know, we need to reach developers, where was Flutter at the time? Well, it was very barely used. It was in alpha. It started as an experiment within Google, actually. So we started using it on our own apps. But there was one app that was using it right when I joined, which is Hamilton, the Broadway musical. Anyone seen Hamilton? Yes, great. One of the biggest perks of joining. I got to see it. That was awesome. But anyway, so it was just one brand, though. So I literally had to base an entire marketing strategy on one Broadway musical, right? Let me just show you a brief video now of where Flutter has gone ever since. So, you know, we've grown quite a lot since those early days. LinkedIn recently said that Flutter is the #1 fastest growing skill among software engineers worldwide. And Fast Company released a report just 2 weeks ago that said that Flutter is one of the top 14 designer tools of the decade, along things like the iPad, Tesla, the Model S, and movements like Black Lives Matter. Not only that, but we've also seen a lot of brands globally. In fact, I feel like some of the brands are actually here in the room today who are using Flutter to power apps downloaded by hundreds of millions of users. So we've talked about the product and who the users are now. So I want to shift a little bit to the connection part. And you know, connecting this product to the users was actually pretty simple. It was like 2 steps, like drawing an owl. Step 1, you draw some circles. Step 2, you draw the rest of the owl. You know, clearly what matters is the details in between. All right, so for the rest of this presentation, you know, I'm going to talk about going from the circles to the owl. And that was things like how do we increase global awareness and usage of Flutter and lightning speed. Now, I'm sure many of you can replace that blue word right there with a specific product you are driving or a campaign you're doing and relate to this question, right? So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to actually talk about 5 specific things we did to go from the circles to the owl, from 0 to 1. So the first is to focus on the non-sexy. Now, what I mean by that is oftentimes we as marketers create very elaborate go-to-market strategies with like 10 prog plans. And of course, it's really important to be substantial and be strategic, but it's also really important to remember about getting the fundamentals and the simple things right. Because I would say about 90% of marketing is non-sexy. A lot of my friends say, oh, Martin, you know, we see what you're doing and all you do all day is just give talks and make decks, right? But you know, that's the peak of the iceberg. But of course, there's that 90% of work, which many of us know that we actually are doing, which is the non-sexy. And so getting the fundamentals right is key. And this is something that I actually understood early on in the Flutter days, because when I joined the team, you know, most of the people on the team knew what Flutter was. And the assumption was that people just know what Flutter is. But then I took a step back and I realized, wait a minute, there's actually nothing that explains to the public what Flutter is. There's no asset or simple message that says the value proposition. And so I made one in the form of a very simple couple-minute introductory animated video. And this was really scrappy. Like, I threw together a basic script. I did the voiceover. I'm not a voiceover actor, so we had a low budget, very little time, so we just threw something together, hired one animator to help me with the graphics, and it was just a couple minutes long, and we launched it. How did it do? It actually did really well. It got over 1.6 million views. It was the most viewed video of the entire year of that Google YouTube channel. It actually did better that year than the company-wide Google I/O conference keynote in views as well. Obviously it helped to have Google behind this. If I launched this on my personal channel, I would have gotten maybe a couple family views, some pity views. But I think the important thing to remember here is the fact that this is a very simple video that people assumed others already knew about, but we did this and it introduced the product to over 1 million people. Another thing is, this was brought up earlier, TikTok, right? But in today's world, things are so short form. People, even in TikTok, I feel like can't stand waiting 10 seconds. They have to go to the next video, right? So with Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, in today's world, the attention span are so limited that it's important for things to be short and concise. And the final insight from this is I actually saw a lot of the animations from this video appear all over the world in different websites and meetups about Flutter. So this was like giving away a free brand book. And all of a sudden, it synchronized the Flutter brand globally. And developers felt like we were really talking to them because of the video. So just remember, focus on the non-sexy and secure some of those short wins early. The second is to curate for the 99%. Now, what I mean by that is most of us will never meet most of the people that use our products. I definitely have not met over 99% of developers using Flutter. So how do we reach them in a way that's personable yet scalable? Let me show you a few examples of how we on the Flutter team have curated for the 99%. So we held our annual conference 2 months ago in Brooklyn, New York. It was called Flutter Interact, and it was the one time a year where we have all of our main announcements, press, and a lot of developers tuning in. But the venue in Brooklyn only fit about 200 people, which is less than 0.01% of the audience we're actually trying to reach. So how do we reach the rest of the people? Well, we encouraged developers to set up their own viewing parties. We created criteria and let them create their own agenda in different parts of the world, so that developers can get together locally and view this and discuss afterwards. And we ended up getting 550 viewing parties across 100 different countries. Just to put this in perspective, for every live attendee, there were 2.41 viewing parties, right? So clearly a lot of people tuning in, but we wanted to take it a step further. Now that we knew there were people tuning in from everywhere, we said, how do we make sure that it's intriguing to them and not just the people in person? So we set up a pre-show before the keynote even started, where we had exclusive interviews and content and interstitials where anyone tuning in online could actually get access to this, and it also helped the retention of people already being tuned in by the time the keynote started. Not only that, but we also cut straight to a live show right after the keynote where we took live questions and answered them from Twitter. So a lot of the attendees in person were jealous, right? Because they don't even get access to check these shows out and to post about it and get their questions answered. But the online audience did, and this also helped retain over 50% of the audience after the keynote ended, which was spectacular. So another example I'll give is Google I/O, the conference I mentioned, which happens around May every time. And this is usually a competition even within Google to get your product above the fold, right? Because this is one chance we each have Android, Chrome, Flutter, Firebase, all these different developer tools to launch and get people's attention. So I was thinking, Flutter, we're young, scrappy, and hungry. We're very small, especially, in the last, some of you got that Hamilton reference, in the last few years. And so we're like, how do we, compete with some of these other huge Google properties in terms of people's attention? Let me show you a brief video of an initiative we did in this past I/O, and then I'll talk more about how it demonstrates this point.
Hey there, I'm Martin from the Flutter team. And today I'm going to be showing you all the awesome things happening with Flutter here at Google I/O. We have a ton of sessions going on, we have a really cool sandbox experience, and we also have people of our team and developer experts that we're going to be hearing from firsthand. So let's take a look. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think of our announcements this year?
I'm the most excited about Flutter 1.5 and what's new in it. And coming to the Dart side of it, I'm also excited about Dart 2.3.
Oh, I think it's got to be Flutter for web, the ability to actually run the same Flutter applications on mobile and web.
I would be able to build games and apps for the web, so I'm very excited about that.
There's so much possibility, and I really can't wait to start playing around with a lot of it, and also editing articles from people writing about it all.
I'm really impressed with just the nature of cross-platform that you can get with widgets, and Flutter in general is just really brilliant.
I'm here in front of the Flutter Sandbox, where we have a lot of exciting things that we just announced inside. We also have a lot of excited Flutter users. In fact, I see some right now.
All right, so some of them are drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much, but it's still good. So we only had about 7,000 developers at I/O last year, but this video had over 15,000 views. So we doubled the amount of views just in our Flutter announcements and demo space than the actual attendees at the entire conference itself, right? And what did it take? Well, it just took a couple people to help with the camera and about 4 hours of their time. So it was honestly a pretty low budget project, but it allowed us to rise above the fold, not only in what these attendees were saying, but also that experience, that whole sandbox demo zone. It took a lot of time and thinking behind building that, and the day after the conference, it's all gone. And this video is a way to preserve some of those experiences. I know PMA, there's some demos out here, and I think like being able to get video coverage of these experiences you build, it really is a way to preserve it and also reference it for future years to come. This helped us reach 99% of our audience and eliminated, FOMO, and also got a lot of brand awareness and downloads as well. And I recently did this about 3 or 4 months ago in Shanghai as well at our GDD China developer event, and that helped bring a lot of people to Shanghai virtually. So, remember to curate for the 99%. The third is to provide the rod and not the fish. So, we recently finished a contest called Flutter Create. And this competition challenged developers to create an app in Flutter using under 5 kilobytes of code. Just to put 5 kilobytes in perspective, that's less than half a second of an MP3 file. It's incredibly limiting. It's a huge constraint. But even with this limitation, I want to show you what resulted from it. Play the video. So actually, when I launched this, I had no idea how it would go. First, I was scared that the limitation was too harsh, and we'd see like a lot of just hello world basic apps. And you just really never know, especially the first time you launch an initiative like this. But it ended up doing very well for us. We were over 750 submissions across 60 different countries. But we also reaped a lot of rewards that we didn't even think about when we launched the competition. For example, a lot of these, we were able to convert them to run for the web, which is a platform that Flutter now reaches as well. So it was a great having a set of samples that we can show off running on the web. One of the submitters sent me a private email saying that their submission turned into a full-time job. Another person tweeted that their whole team asked a week's of vacation just to be able to work on this contest. We even got a lot of side PR opportunities from this because the grand prize winner was a self-taught beginner from Shenzhen, China, who taught himself Flutter just 3 weeks before the contest ended. And they won the $10,000 iMac grand prize. And so we actually covered a story with him and published it, and Google-wide, they tweeted about it at the Google handle, which got us a ton of press. A lot of people even at Google were really introduced to Flutter through something like this, and it was something that I'd never thought of when we initiated the competition. And so I think the insight here that can be applied in general is when you run things like competitions, because other people are creating it for you and there's going to be all these stories that come out of it, you can actually end up having all these secondary amazing results from it, even though you also met some of the primary results you wanted. And for that reason, I've actually just finished the second contest that we'll be announcing. I'll be giving a keynote at Mobile World Congress in a few weeks in Barcelona, where we'll actually announce the winners of this. We're currently going through the judging of it. But this was a contest in partnership with the Google Assistant and the Lenovo teams. So we also formed a partnership for the second one to build clock faces. And some of the winners might actually be shipped in the product itself. And so, this is something flutter.dev/clock, if you want to check out, we'll be announcing the winners. But I think, again, if you launch these contests and you provide the rod and let others fish rather than just giving the end app, I think that you can reap a lot of rewards from that. The fourth is to form win-win partnerships. So, Flutter recently expanded beyond mobile. I mentioned the web. It can also run on desktop and other embedded form factors. I've seen some interesting tweets, like someone running Flutter on their Tesla. I'm like, don't do that in Drive, please. But there's a lot of places that Flutter is now running. And instead of just announcing this feature, though, we really wanted to lead it with a known partnership so that it has immediate credibility. So this time we actually partnered with the New York Times. And they built their new puzzle on Flutter for mobile, web, and desktop. So here it is running. It's the KenKen puzzle app. It's live right now if you want to try it on any of your devices. And we announced this as part of the keynote at Google I/O. And this immediately brought attention not only to this great app experience, but now folks knew that you can run Flutter this way on all devices. We also revamped our showcase page to get some of those developer stories and partnerships in order to not just have Hamilton be the only app people remember. So we partnered with apps like Alibaba, Reflectly, Google Ads, etc., Abbey Road Studios. So, secure those partnerships for sure. Finally, and one of my favorites, is let them tell your story. So one of the things I love the most about my job is the individual stories that come out of it. A lot of times it's intuitive as humans to just see things as output or numbers or ROI, but we forget that there's people behind every one of these creations. And for me, it was really important to actually showcase the stories, especially with developers. A lot of folks just see their final apps or their output or their websites, and they don't really focus as much as I think they should on the stories themselves. So we really wanted to change that. So we actually created a campaign last year called My Flutter Story, where we encourage developers to submit stories about themselves, not just their apps. And I want to show you that video.
I'm a software engineer born in Bulgaria.
I'm an Android developer based in Berlin.
I'm a Flutter developer.
I am a web developer.
I'm an Android engineer from Hangzhou, China.
I'm Anna from GDGBuddy.
I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
I am from Lima, Peru.
I am in Denver, Colorado.
Flutter has changed the way I develop, really because of the fact that I've never really developed with a bird by my side all the time.
Flutter changed a lot of things in our lives. First of all, it changed the way that we code.
I fell in love with Flutter from the very first time I saw Emily live coding the meme chat app on Google I/O.
And what's great is that Flutter is native.
Me and my partner built an app in a single day.
Our company currently works on 5 Flutter projects.
With Flutter, I don't have to go online and check the docs anymore. The way the framework is structured makes it easy to jump into the definition and learn new things.
I switched to Flutter from JavaScript and PHP. Having strictly typed code is just a game changer.
My favorite part about Flutter is that it does not limit your imagination.
So that bird is our mascot, Dash. Dash is everywhere and people love it. It's a whole other lesson I should probably add about mascots and everything that we've learned a lot from as well. I wish I could have brought some here today, but this video, as you saw, I remember I got really emotional. It was probably the most emotional I've ever gotten at work when I started receiving all these submissions and going through them to see which ones will make the video, and I wanted all of them to, honestly. And it was really empowering. It really gave me another energy to just continue, seeing the long-term vision for this team. And I remember when we shared it with all the Flutter team, everyone was really empowered, and it was a really remarkable moment. And I think if you think about your products and users, everyone likes sharing their story. And we as marketers have the ability to elevate that and let everyone have a voice. And so this was a big life lesson for me too, which is, really thinking about ways to continue sharing people's individual stories and not just only focusing on output and numbers. So I really hope that these 5 tips are helpful as we move on. And with My Flutter Story, I hope we can all tell our PMM stories in the next couple days. It's really seriously a privilege to be here in Austin. As was mentioned before about networking, I think it's amazing to be able to gain all these new perspectives from folks all over the world. And so, I'm really looking forward to meeting the rest of you in the coming days. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys hear me? Thank you, Martin. Wait, don't go. Does anyone have any questions for Martin?
I wanted to ask you for the competition with the developers. The developers had already a license of Flutter, or did you reach out to people who didn't have a license?
Sure.
And since it's a paid license, how did you overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The question was essentially, do people have licenses to use Flutter in the competition? So something I forgot to mention, which I probably should, given I'm a marketer, is that Flutter is completely free and open source. So it has an open MIT license for anyone to use, and it's free to download and use. Google, benefits from Flutter in other ways. Allows you to use other Google properties and products. It gives us an on-ramp to iOS as well, and reaching other platforms besides Android. So we don't actually make direct money from Flutter, and it's an open license for anyone to download from the world. Yeah. Any other questions?
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, it's a great question. The question was, how do we get all those stories without people being shy, or how do we encourage folks to share their story? So that's something we actually thought of, and what we did is we actually, instead of having them tweet it, we encouraged them to tweet it with a hashtag, but we actually had a private form for them to submit videos directly to our team for the final video, ones that we said if they would, consent for them to be comfortable us publishing the video itself. But we made it so that they don't actually have to tweet it out or reference it themselves if they prefer it to just be in the final video. And then we actually shared it across all of our existing channels and tell them to, share it with their friends. Yeah. To share a story, yeah. So we actually showed that video on our annual launch event, which is seen by, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And I think, it's just folks get excited about being able to have their story on the big screen at the Google-wide level. We also have a lot of these members are very active in the community, and I believe we actually shipped a Dash, the mascot, to all the folks as well that were making the video. So we had a few other things as like thank yous for sharing their story, because obviously it can be vulnerable. But we also made sure that they knew that this will be shown. Don't be surprised if you submit a video if it appears on the stage.
Thank you, Martin.